Ani, Buju, Vanessa Gray, Indigenous Cause, Janang Gunjaba, Nishna Bani Dao, Makwan and Dodem. Hi, my name is Vanessa Gray. I'm here on behalf of Indigenous Climate Action. I'm here and I'm so honored to be hosting this panel tonight. We will be focusing on who is financing the destruction of our lands. I want to begin with acknowledging the land. We are here for those who are joining us online on Treaty 6 territory. This event is part of a number of events we are hosting around RBC's 2013 AGM. This panel is taking place on the eve of this annual general meeting. And we are, as I said, live streaming this very exciting event. Washrooms for everyone here in the room are just outside the door across the hall past the stairs. And I want to thank everyone for wearing a mask. I will start by introducing our first speaker, Chief Na'moks. Chief Na'moks is a Hereditary Chief of We'tsuwet'en. RBC is a financier of the Coastal Gaslink pipeline crossing We'tsuwet'en land. Please give a warm welcome to Chief Na'moks.
As stated, I am Chief Na'moks. I am a hereditary chief of our nation. Our nation is 22,000 square kilometers, and it is unceded and non-treaty. You know, when we talk about the Royal Bank of Canada financing the Coastal Gaslink project through TC Energy, you have to remember that British Columbia and Canada only have assumed and presumed authority on our lands. We've never given that up. I want you to remember the Delgamuukw court case. Our cousins of the Gitxsan, Gisteway is here. In that court case, it stated that we exist, we have authority. We've never given away any of that authority to either British Columbia or Canada. We never will. So when we want to talk about Coastal Gaslink and Royal Bank of Canada, and they say that they have consent on our lands, they never talked to us. We never gave our consent. There was no free, prior, and informed consent. When you think about the Royal Bank of Canada, I often think, where does that word royal come from when they can't even treat us properly? You know, when you think about the $262 billion that they've invested in fossil fuels, 10.8 billion of that just this past year. And then they go around and tell the world that doing great things for banking industries and institutions. We need to remind the world that this is money. This has no morals. It has no heart. It has no soul. You're human. You do. Often when you hear the Royal Bank of Canada talk about how they'll transition, they came up with this number of 2050. This should have been done in the 60s. 2050 is a long ways away. How much more damage are they going to do to this planet in that time? For our people, I look at our women, the violence they face. RBC's got to be held accountable for that. The arrest of our people removed from our lands, RCB's got to be held accountable for that. You think about the abuse on our land to the people, to the water, to the salmon. RBC should be held accountable. When they're held accountable, then change will happen for the better for this entire planet. You can make that change by standing up and speaking, stopping these projects being financed by institutions such as the Royal Bank of Canada. When they start talking billions and trillions of dollars, it's like the human doesn't exist. You need to speak up, you need to stand up and let them know that you do exist, you do matter, and you do count. Otherwise, they will continue on this path of destruction. That wasn't me. I often think about the value of money and what was said years ago. These billionaires are so poor, all they have is money. You have water, you have rights, you have title, you have freedoms. This so-called country of Canada, day by day, we're watching this democracy getting whittled down to be controlled by industry, corporations. The humanity of that often makes me think at night about how my father, as a Second World War veteran, fought for this. How my mother, who was a residential school survivor, fought hard to keep us out of residential schools. And yet it was these banks and this government that forced that upon it. Now you think about cycles. That's what industries and banks do. They have a pattern, they stick to that pattern, and they keep repeating it. As wrong as it is, they keep doing the same thing over and over again. You can make that difference. You can make that change, and you can make them listen. Tomorrow when we speak to them, we'll remind them of that. Do you know that last year, Giniw, myself, Chief Madiq, we went to Toronto. I'm sad to say that Madiq is not with us anymore. We lost him in December. His very last act was to go to Toronto to talk to the board of RBC and tell them how wrong they are. And here we are again. Do you know what they did last year? They canceled it. When our plane landed in Toronto, we got the message that it was online after we traveled across Canada. Try to make us think that we didn't matter, that our voice didn't matter, that us being there didn't matter. But you know what? The people said, you're here and we will listen to you. And that's what needs to happen tomorrow. It can't be just their CEO, Dave Mackay. It can't be just a board of directors. We are there to let the shareholders know they need to be held accountable. They need to change the way they are, because this is a planet that we live on that doesn't need us. We need this planet. What we do makes a huge difference for our children and grandchildren. We as Wet'suwet'en, when we're chosen to carry the names that we do, it comes from the land up. We don't own that land. We caretake it for everybody. We always say for the betterment of all. It doesn't say just for the Wet'suwet'en, because you got to remember, water flows and the wind blows. Everything that happens on our land affects all of you. We take that serious. That's a huge responsibility. So what do? They bring in armed forces. They create an arm of the RCMP, CERG, Community Industry Response Group, in response to people standing up against industries and banks that are destroying this planet. That is what they do. You know what we do? We remain Wet'suwet'en. They can't take that away from us. They cannot take the humanity away from you. And they cannot keep you silent. Use your voice to stand up. Be heard, be seen. Be alive. I work with a number of people. We particularly talked about our young ladies. And they said that they were heroes for doing what they do, putting their lives on the line, getting locked up, being removed from the territory, being incarcerated, getting put in front of judges, having injunctions and placed on them, and then say, hey, for 9, 12 months, you can't even go on your own territory. Where else in Canada does that happen in this day and age? For as long as it has. 3 raids on us. It looks like we're being invaded by military force. They come in, guns, dogs, helicopter, snipers. I have a cousin here, his brother sat in one of our towers with a sniper yelling at him, take the gun off me. And this is Canada. And this is what they're allowing to happen. So when you have the Royal Bank of Canada investing billions of dollars to uphold industry that is destroying this planet, worldwide, you can all make a difference. Worldwide, you can make everybody listen. Do you know why? Because like-minded and like-hearted people will always win. All you got to do is remember that. When I think of our elders and what they said before they passed, the center of your table is your child. That table is the earth. If you look after one, you look after all, and that means for everybody. We cannot be just another statistic in a police report. We can no longer be just a number at the bottom line of the shareholder's pocketbook. What we need to remember, and I'll say it 100 times to you, be heard, be seen, be listened to. Do you really want to be in the same situation that the We'tsuwet'en live in? Do you want your children to be in that situation? Today, we can drink out of our creeks, lakes, and rivers. We've had lots of guests come to our territory, and it's the first time in their life they ever drank out of a river. That's how clean our waters are. This is what we're trying to protect. In British Columbia, our waters flow to the Skeena River and the Fraser. That is all of British Columbia. If you look after that water, it'll look after you. If you look after this planet, it'll look after you. But if you allow shareholders in Royal Bank of Canada to take that away from us, they're taking it away from you too. You need to realize that they do not govern you. Even the elected officials, they don't govern you. You govern them. You need to remind them of that. In a democratic country, we have elections. We replace people. Remember, quite often, politicians are just like diapers. They got to be changed regularly. If they give off the reek that they're giving us today, they should be changed. There's not any one of the three major parties in this country that is yet to stand up to speak on behalf of the water, the land, the people, in particular the We'tsuwet'en. And yet Canada has received 3 letters from the United Nations. Canada hasn't even responded to it. You know, I've had the opportunity 3 times to speak at the United Nations, and each time, yes, it was on human rights, Indigenous rights, but also the fact that we didn't agree with Canada sitting on the Security Council. Where's our security when they want a seat on the United Nations for the world? The very people that live in this country, the very first people who follow our law, Giniw, our law, our way, and it comes from the earth, the water, the skies, the animals, the plants. That is our law. How can we tell these banks that they're wasting money, that these projects are not going to be complete because we've not agreed to it? But we can never, ever do it alone. That's how we can tell them that. It's with all of you standing up and setting things right. There's nothing wrong with telling the truth, and the truth is they're destroying this planet for everybody. That is the truth. Never be afraid to speak the truth, and it is never, ever too late to speak the truth. I speak the truth to you. I want you to speak the truth back to us and say, we will stop it. We will not deal with these banks that are ruining this planet without the permission of the people who truly are the caretakers of the land. I thank you. Masai Kyo.
Miigwech, thank you so much for your words and everything you do, Chief Namax, really. Chief Namax lives on Zoom, by the way. I cannot believe how much screen time this man gets, but I have the pleasure, I'm so honored to have joined you in so many meetings leading up to this event. I just want to express my sincerest gratitude for you, Chief Namax. I really hope to be as charming as you one day. So moving along, we all took part, those of us who are part of the Indigenous Delegation and some of the local organizers. We took part in a gifting ceremony earlier today where everything was smudged and we had drumming and we had dancing and it was good times. And before I introduce to you our next speaker, I have the pleasure of gifting Tara her blanket. We've had a local woman make the star blankets as a token of our gratitude for all your work. So you remember your time here in Treaty 6. So I'll do that now. I was asked to do it before you speak. Thank you so much. I like wrap people in them. So.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Oh, what?
I put it on you if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. Oh, wow.
Where should I skip? I'm gonna go last.
Oh.
We're gonna last, but I'll show them my
Oh,
blanket.
okay,
I'm
okay.
gonna show 'em my blanket.
Okay, so I'm glad that was done. Okay, so we are going to move along to Roishetta Ozane, who is the Executive Director of the Vessel Project and the Gulf Fossil Finance Coordinator for Texas Campaign for the Environment, who will speak to RBC's financing of LNG in the Gulf of Mexico.
Picket lines and picket signs. Don't punish me with brutality. Talk to me so you can see what's going on. Those are the famous words of Marvin Gaye, a famous singer who is long deceased from the United States. I'm Roishetta Sibley Ozane. I come to you from the Gulf Coast. Many of you have heard of Louisiana. You've probably heard of New Orleans and heard of Mardi Gras and gumbo and crawfish and crab legs and Gulf shrimp. Well, I'm from the state of Louisiana, but I live in a part of Louisiana called Southwest Louisiana. Southwest Louisiana is on the border of Texas, and it is home to 5 parishes, which include Allen, Beauregard, Cameron, Calcasieu, and Jeff Davis. I live in Calcasieu Parish. Calcasieu Parish is about, in Lake Charles is the city seat, the bigger city in Calcasieu Parish. It's about 80,000 residents, and half of those residents are Black. And in that community, there are more than 12 petrochemical facilities that surrounds the community, 2 LNG facilities that are currently operating, and more than 20 more facilities proposed along the Gulf Coast. We have been fighting with the 6 largest U.S. banks that fund fossil fuel, which is Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Goldman Sachs. Those are some of the banks in America that we've been fighting. But in this fight to end this fossil fuel infrastructure, we found out that the Royal Bank of Canada also finances several of these facilities along the Gulf Coast. And I came here to show that not only are you fighting here in Canada, but we are fighting the same issues in the United States in the Gulf Coast. I live in a predominantly Black community, of course. I'm a Black woman. I have 6 children. In my backyard, from my back window, I can see 12 petrochemical facilities. Out of those facilities, several of them have had explosions in the last couple of years where several people have been hurt. But I have to look at my 6 children every day, 3 of which have asthma, 2 of which have eczema. Eczema is a skin condition. Asthma is a breathing condition. They're being poisoned by the very air that they breathe. And what is contributing to that poison is the fossil fuel industries that are in our backyards. We're sick and tired of these industries coming into our communities, killing us and killing our children. So I came thousands of miles away from home. left my 6 children home, who, if you hear my phone buzzing or you've seen me on the phone today, it's my children who have been calling me all day. They want to see the snow. They want to know how Canada is. They want to know if the northern lights have lit up the sky yet. They think it's beautiful. They think I'm doing something luxurious because they cannot imagine a place that is compared to where we live, where our night skies are lit up by LNG facilities. When you come into Southwest Louisiana and you're crossing over the I-10 bridge, there's lights all over the sky. You think you're in Las Vegas. You'll think you're in a big city, but it's actually the flares from all of the petrochemical facilities that we have in our community. It's the smokestacks, it's the steam, it's the smog. We see it every day, all day. It doesn't stop. So my children have envisioned that there's a place in the world that's more beautiful, and they feel like, since I told them that it was negative 11 degrees here, that it just had to be snow, and they wanted to know if I was building snowmen. And I was like, no, I'm doing the same thing that I do when I'm at home. I'm fighting for your right to breathe clean air. I'm fighting for their right to drink clean water. It is absolutely ludicrous that BIPOC people, Black, Indigenous, people of color, we continue to get the short end of the stick. We continue to be marginalized. We continue to be placed in a box in which we cannot breathe. Why do we allow them to keep doing this to us? Because we divide ourselves. We separate our fights. It's time for us to connect the dots amongst ourselves. It's time for us to show up in solidarity and say that we will no longer accept the status quo. We will no longer accept the fact that they have placed us, Black, Indigenous people of color, at the bottom of the list. We're the last ones to get picked for anything good and the first ones to experience everything bad. We are contributing the least to climate change, yet we are experiencing the worst of its effects. Why is this? They have learned how to separate us. They have learned how to pit us against each other. But until we can connect the dots and show that from the Gulf Coast of the United States to Canada to Australia, all of these fights are connected all the way to Ukraine. You know, our government tells us that we have to fast track LNG so that Ukraine can be weaned off of Russian gas. But we know that Ukraine is trying to wean itself off of fossil fuel infrastructure. So by the time the projects are built and approved in the U.S., Ukraine will no longer need our gas. So what are we doing? We are fast-tracking environmental racism. We are fast-tracking the murder of Black, Indigenous people of color. We are fast-tracking our women and children coming up missing. In the United States, when Black women come up missing, you know what they do? Continue with their day. No one looks for them. No one tries to find them. No one cares. There are millions of Black women and children who are missing. Their faces are just on billboards. We find that in communities that are surrounded by LNG facilities, this happens more. And we understand that the same thing is happening in Indigenous communities. Why don't people care about our women and children? Because they put us in a box. They put us in a box and they nailed the coffin shut, but they did not understand that we had the power and the strength to break out of that box. And that's why I'm here today. We are not seeds. We are not weeds. We are seeds. And I'm here to help water these seeds so that we can continue to grow and continue to grow this movement, continue to show solidarity. And we're going to show the Royal Bank of Canada that we don't care how much money that they have. Their money is nothing to us compared to the power and the strength and the solidarity that we have. We're going to show up and we're going to show them that all we need is an invitation. And we don't even need that. Some of us had to get proxies, me. But we don't even need an invitation. If we have the chance the opportunity, the breath of life. If we wake up in the morning and we see the sun rise, we will win when we go before them. It does not matter who they are and what they have. What matters is that we will be there together. Somebody today told me, he said, don't be scared now. I said, I'm not. I fight the United States government every day. The difference here is when I go inside of that AGM tomorrow, I know that I'll have all of you outside waiting for me. So I'm not scared at all. Thank you all for welcoming me here.
Wow, Miigwech, thank you so much for such a powerful talk. We all deeply appreciate it, and we really could feel your words and your experience. Our next speaker is Jessie Cardinal. Jessie is a mother and the executive director of Keepers of the Water, an Indigenous organization that works to defend water through cultural power building, policy and legal defense, education, and training community members to conduct water health monitoring. She is also a language learner of the Cree language and is from the Kikimo Métis settlement. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming.
Toao ni totem tek kita tam skat nawao Jessie Cardinal natsiga asun kikino chinia. Keepers of the Water at Toskian. I'm Jessie Cardinal, and I'm currently serving as the executive director for Keepers of the Water. Keepers of the Water is an Indigenous-led organization, and we work to protect water. The organization was formed in 2006 on the shores of the Decho, which is a Dene word that means the mighty river. And in summary, there was a declaration made in 2006, and it was led by the Dene people. Cree people were there, and non-Indigenous people, and they came together, all concerned about the water, and a declaration was made. And in summary, it says that water is sacred, and that we must work to protect it. And so when I'm speaking to you tonight, I'm thinking of and speaking of aunties, I was going to talk about my auntie, but I wanted to say about Rochetta, that she has big auntie energy. And I said, can I mention that? And she said, what is that? I've never heard of that. And I said, well, in Indian country, aunties are people you don't want to mess with. So that's definitely her. And so we thank you for your big auntie energy. And so my auntie, one of my aunties, my auntie Mona Cardinal from Saddle Lake, she taught me that the longest journey that we take is from our heads to our hearts. And as a Nehiao Esqueo and somebody in a leadership position, I've had to do a lot of changes and do a lot of things in my life to be able to walk this journey that I'm on and do it with dignity. And so I'm sober. I don't do drugs. I don't drink. I don't smoke. And so I feel like that I more and more talk from my heart. We do a lot of community work with Keepers of the Water. We work I'm from Treaty 8 territory and Treaty 6 territory, right on the border there. And so we work in what's called Alberta, Northwest Territories, Northern Saskatchewan. And a lot of the work that we do community work. And so I'm a community person. I live in my community. I grew up in Kikino. It's in the boreal forest. And growing up on the land, you're just automatically connected to the land. And I understand that that's a privilege, and I don't take that for granted. And so right now I think of the time of the year we're in. It's called Aigi Pisum, Frog Moon. And I know I'm not saying that right. My Cree instructor, Leona Makokis, will correct me. but it's April, we call it Frog Moon. And so as you guys will hear, the frogs will start to come out. And so we just finished up Niskipism. Niskipism is Goose Moon. So we look forward to that, you know, because we know in March that the geese are coming. And sure enough, in Kikino, they came on March 29th and 30th. So the first goose came. So they and we're learning this. We pay attention. So they have scout geese. And you'll see one goose and he'll come by himself and he's by himself. And then, you know, he comes to check it out if it's okay. So by the end of the month, they came. And now we're in Frog Moon. So this is when all of the frogs are coming out. And so I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about what we're seeing in the work that I'm doing with Keepers of the Water. We do have a website. If you haven't heard of us, keepersofthewater.ca. We also have a Facebook page, so check us out in the work that we're doing. I need to clear my throat. And so we've been meeting here all day. So for those of you online or those of you that have just joined us, we have started at 8:30 in the morning with a pipe ceremony. I think this one. And we started with a pipe ceremony, and we've been talking and sharing because we have people from the south, the north, the east, and the west all coming together. And we're all, it's wonderful. Like, it's been a long day, but very energizing because we're just, you know, being able to hear about the We'tsuwet'en people and, you know, that they were sharing that they had a raid on them and, you know, what that felt like. And we're here in solidarity with the We'tsuwet'en people who are going to be going to the RBC shareholder meeting next week. And so what I wanted to talk about was what we're seeing. So, and that's what I wanted to mention. Somebody was talking today about northern BC and all of the LNG that's coming out of there. And if it happens when all of these projects are approved, it'll be one of the biggest contributors to greenhouse gases in the world. Well, the tar sands is one of the biggest industrial projects currently in the world, and it's located in Treaty 8 territory in Fort McMurray. And so we've been, that's part of why Keepers of the Water formed, was because there was a lot of concerns from land users. We were seeing the water levels were dropping, the quality of the water was changing. We were seeing the animals were confused because there's just so much activity and destruction happening. And so Alberta, if you guys didn't know, what's called Alberta is the biggest producer of oil and gas in the country of Canada. So what that means is they're also the biggest, the most cumulative impacts. Deforestation is happening so rapidly. We hear it all the time. Like, as Keepers of the Water, we get phone calls, we get emails, people reaching out to us, crying, hurting because of the deforestation that's happening and how quickly it's happening, and they feel completely helpless. Wetlands are being removed. The air quality, somebody mentioned air quality. So Fort McMurray and downstreams, those used to be called the sacrifice zones. But what I'm telling people in Alberta, because everybody needs to wake up, Alberta is a sacrifice zone. If you live in Alberta, you need to wake up. So Edmonton is a major city. It's on almost a daily air quality warning now, because there's Fort Saskatchewan, they have all those refineries. They call that Cancer Alley. That's just right outside of Edmonton. Plus, these cities keep expanding, so they're growing. That was never meant to happen. That is not sustainable, and that's not normal. And so the city of Edmonton is just growing and growing and growing. And how is that gonna be, how is that gonna be sustainable? And so they're always on air quality warnings. And then I'll just tell you guys a little bit about what's happening in Fort McMurray. So in Fort McMurray, there's like 30-some big companies. RBC is financing a lot of these companies. And they have these, so it's growing. So they're taking bitumen out of the ground. We call it tar sands because it's not oil. They don't take oil out of the ground. They take this thick clay that's called tar sands, and they ship it down to be refined in different places, and then they make it into oil. And so as they're taking out this bitumen, there's these things called tailings ponds. So to take out the bitumen, I like to move around a bit. So to take out the bitumen, They do that, but it requires a lot of fresh water. So the government and the companies will say it takes to make 1 barrel of oil is about 4 barrels of fresh water. That's what the governments and the companies will tell you. But I've been at this for a long time, and a lot of independent scientists and organizations will tell you it's up to 10 barrels of fresh water. This is all coming out from underground and the Athabasca River. And so you can imagine they're making like millions of barrels of oil a day in Fort McMurray, how much fresh water is being used. And so when they're done all that, there's this toxic waste that's left, and it's so toxic that it can't be treated. They have yet, so the tar sands started in Fort McMurray, really ramped up in about the 50s. They're still using that same technology from the 50s as they are today. So they haven't like changed any of their infrastructure. So these tailings ponds now, they call them ponds, but they're the size of like big lakes, and they're filled with completely toxic liquid waste. If anything lands on them, they die. And so what the government of Alberta has proposed in 2019, and these companies that RBC is financing, so RBC is directly implicated in this. So what these companies and the government is proposing is they're saying, oh, we found a way to treat these tailings ponds now, so we're gonna start dumping them into the Athabasca River. So Keepers of the Water, we quickly mobilized, because we've been at this for a long time, and we're like, this is crazy, this is insane, and we know that this isn't true. And so we quickly mobilized, we got our independent science people, and we looked at the science that the companies are using to say what they're using to treat the tailings, and we found out, no, it's not safe. There's still major chemicals, there's still metals, there's something called naphthenic acid and saline. And so that's what they want to do. These companies don't care about people. They just want to continue expanding and growing and dump the tailings ponds so that they can keep filling up these big pits with more tailings. And so we're fighting to stop that. We've been working with an organization called Environmental Defense. Indigenous Climate Action has also been helping, Council of Canadians. Keepers of the Water stance, we're against any dumping of any tailings into the Athabasca River, and so, or any water. Our water is not dumping grounds, and that's the thing about Alberta. It's scary, like what's happening there. They are just dumping toxic stuff left and right wherever they can get away with it. So they're using our rivers as dumping grounds. But the other thing people need to be aware of, and I'll just wrap up in a couple minutes here, is they're also dumping a lot of toxic waste underground. And so they're starting to make these regulations quietly. Basically, they're making their own laws to say that it's legal to dump, they call it wastewater, into these empty caverns. Our elders know, and this is what we've been taught, water is connected. Everything is connected. So even if it's an empty, like they make it sound like there's no life, but we know there's life there. And there's like all kinds of living beings that live underground too, that we don't see or we don't, hear of. And so we're working to stop that. The other thing that I want to Alberta's a mess, but the other thing I want to let you guys know about is the natural gas extraction. So there's a lot of that happening. CNRL is one of the biggest natural gas extractors. They do fracking to do that. RBC is financing CNRL, they're financing Suncor. So CNRL is, they're doing fracking, they're causing earthquakes now. And so in December, we had one of the biggest earthquakes in northern Alberta to ever be on record. Keepers of the Water tried to let people know about that. The mainstream media would not cover it. Then it happened again in March in the exact same place. And we said, these earthquakes are happening right under CNRL's operations. So we have worked, and so we have a lot of good people that will come to us either behind the scenes or publicly. They have this knowledge. So some scientists came to us who's done a lot of studies, and they said based on what's been happening at that spot, they're estimating that there's gonna be another earthquake in about June, and that it could cause death to people in Peace River. But you're not hearing any of that in the news. And so there's just so much cumulative impacts happening, and it's because of the banks, RBC, it's crazy how many extraction companies that they are financing. And this word divestment, like, I'll be honest, like, we're community people, like, you go to my community of Kikino, they're not gonna know what divestment means. So I appreciate so much, you know, like people like Tara and the We'tsuwet'en people who have worked to learn these, like, we've had to like step into these worlds and learn this language, you know, and so I appreciate you guys for doing that, because it's not an easy thing to do. There's a lot more that I can say, but what I want to close with is we're going to be having a healing walk. So if you ever heard of the tar sands healing walks, because the thing is, like, it's heavy. You guys are probably feeling really like sad and like hopeless right now, because it is sad, you know, to see the destruction that's happening to our land. And the thing is, it's not only us, it's all of us that are affected. So it's going to take all of us to change. And what I've been learning too is, like, when Indigenous people are on the front lines, we need non-Indigenous people to be right there. Because when there's white people there, there's going to be less violence, there's going to be more news coverage, and those two things alone, we need your help for that. And so for healing, it's really important, and this is the thing I'll leave you guys with, is the elders tell us and have told me, you have to have hope. And we heard it in the room today, like we have elders from what's known as BC, and we had some Cree elders speaking here, you know, who have gone through things like residential schools, and they still stand here today, and their message is for us to have hope, you know. And so who are we to not have hope after everything that they survived? And so one of the things that Keepers of the Water has done is we host a healing walk, because healing, we have to take care of ourselves in this work, and we have to heal, and we have to believe, like Namak says, we have to believe, and like Curtis Sisam, Sylvia McAdams' brother, one day we are going to have clean water. One day we are going to see the forest again. One day the animals are going to be plentiful. We need to believe that, and we need to keep praying for that. And so the healing walk is to pray for the land. The last one we had was in 2014, and it was like people were coming from all over the world. It happens right in the tar sands. It's a 14-kilometer walk. So stay tuned on our website and our Facebook page, because we are going to be having another tar sands healing walk in August 3rd to the 7th. And so everyone's welcome to come and attend that walk, because it's really important to see firsthand like what the tar sands looks like. It's massive, and it's like Mordor, like they have gunshots going off to keep the animals away. They have like places that look like the desert, because the land is so dead that nothing will ever grow there again. And in the smack dab middle of that is a community called Fort Mackay. Jean Lomcourt's on our board. And so they are the same thing. They are completely surrounded by that. They can't even open their window, because like they're completely surrounded. There's so much more I could say, but I do want to hear from Tara, and then we want to open for questions. So I thank you all for caring, and I thank you all for coming here this evening, and I hope you have safe journeys home. Hi, kinana skom nawa.
Well, I'm feeling right at home at this panel. I don't know about you. Some really amazing people are sharing their time and their voices with us. And I just want to say that what is so moving about the tar sands healing walk is not only like the exposure to what industry is doing, what the banks are currently financing, because I have lots of exposure at home. I come from a place where it's surrounded by refineries, but what was more powerful for me was coming together and watching the leadership of Indigenous women stand up to the industry and walk in healing and focusing within community. So that is probably why I'm standing here today, is because I went to a tar sands healing walk. And yeah, so I highly recommend it. So I am now going to introduce the last speaker of tonight. Tara Houska is a tribal attorney, land defender, environmental and Indigenous rights advocate, and founder of the Giniw Collective, an Indigenous women two-spirit-led frontline resistance to defend the sacred and live in balance. Please welcome Tara.
How buju Giniw, Miniwa and Dinwe Maganiduk, Shabawekwe and Dishnakas Makwa and Dudame, Coaching and Dunchpa. Hi, I'm Tara. I'm Bear Clan from Couchiching. It's a little further east from here. Really glad to be here with all of you. It's an honor to be invited and to share space. Hear these awesome words from these awesome people. Can we give them another round of applause? Oh my goodness. And y'all actually also got me out of court, so like there's that. I was supposed to be in court today. They Zoomed. It was awesome. From my alleged criminal charges from my stand against Line 3 in our territory, tar sands pipeline coming out of Alberta, all connected to the rest of this awful evil, which is why we're all on a panel sharing together. I really like seeing this room because it's full of like faces that are familiar in so many different ways, you know? It's like, see like the folks with wisdom in their words, see the folks that are land defenders that are out there standing the line and holding down the line, see the folks that are healing the water and praying for the water, that are walking and just holding space, concerned community members that just care, you know, young people taking a stand. And of course, it's like also all these different fights over so many years that I've been part of and stood with a lot of folks that have been in this room. And I think it's, you know, like one of those, when you come to this part of the fight, it's like, okay, we've opened just about every last door, and we've kicked a lot of them open, right? We've went in front of the politicians who've got to have their diapers changed. We've, you know, knocked on the regulators' doors. We went to the United Nations. We went to the press. We went to the media. We've gone to the province. We've gone to, you know, like every last step of the way. We've gone to the courts. We've gone to the people, you know, and at least for me, it can feel like you're like, oh my God, we're still fighting this because it's so long. It's not a short fight. It's a long haul, you know. And then you see those destroyers of the earth who are so disconnected from themselves, building this giant cement sore in the earth in a beautiful place. And it's like so heartbreaking, you know, and you're just, I mean, at least for me, I feel like I'm standing outside those fences, like, and then I'm like maybe over the fences, I don't know, you know, and then apparently I have court cases, but like, there's that, but then there's also just like this, I feel like you're always like, at least for me, I'm like waffling back and forth between like, not full-on despair, but just like, oh my God, how are we still fighting this? How am I still sitting across the table from a human being explaining to them that they need water to survive? How is that the reality? How am I sitting there looking at somebody who's been so educated in so many different ways, wearing your big three-piece suit, acting like you own the world, and you forgot that you drink water. you forgot that you need these places to be alive, that your children can't drink money, right? Like that's like the slogans that we're saying, but it's the truth, right? It's so, it takes so much on your spirit to do that again and again and again. And so, I mean, to every person in this room, seriously, thank you for being that person, you know, like for taking that space in your heart and in your soul to do that, because it's hard to do that. But then I also see, like, in these different fights, I've watched so many different people, like you were talking about the visitors that come to see and that feel like they feel drawn to a different way of thinking. They feel drawn to something that's missing. They feel like, here's people that are saying something that's completely different than everything else I've heard, and I feel compelled, you know, or I feel that call for help, for solidarity. And then watching those people when there's like this, it's like almost like a spark, like a physical spark that you actually watch pass between them and the earth. And like they see the earth as a relative and they understand for just maybe that moment, or maybe it actually is like life-changing for them. And watching that happen again and again has been one of the biggest, you know, honors of my life, to see that person just like feeling like roar, you know, and they get it, you know, and you feel like, wow, this is like, you're watching a human being connecting to themselves in real time. Like that's an incredibly beautiful thing to watch. It's so powerful to see that. And I feel like when you're part of those little groups that are in the woods or on the prairie or by the rising seas or stand by the rivers or wherever it happens to be, there's something different about standing with the land in that way. And there's something different than being when you're looking down those folks and you're in the woods, and at least that's been my most latest experience. I'm gonna grab a drink of water. I don't know, I always like had like these moments where I'm like looking around the trees around us and looking at the inevitable animals that are there. You know, there's like maybe an eagle comes, maybe a hawk comes, maybe some crows or whatever. Maybe it's just some squirrels, but somebody's watching. Somebody's always watching, right? And then I think of the trees themselves that are watching, and I'm thinking about like, what have they seen? Not just in their lives, but in their ancestors' lives. What have they watched these different mindsets do? They've seen us fight over and over and over again and defend over and over and over again. And that gives me like so much hope too, you know, to know that we've done this before, and that at the end of it, no matter what, we've continued on, that our truths continue on, that the forest sees that, the prairie sees that, and like feels that love and that care. You know, that you get those moments of watching an animal look at you, and I feel like it's like they're really looking, you know, and like, I see you, you know? There's that. And then there's also like, I mean, I don't know, and this is like the maybe a little more rabble-rouser part, but like, I also like never fail to notice how scared those folks are of us, you know? Like they're sitting there in like full-on riot gear with like weapons and like all that, and we're sitting there with like sage, you know, and like sweetgrass and a campfire, or what, you know what I mean? And they're like terrified of us. That says so much in and of itself, that they are so afraid of that. And we're talking about banks, right? So like, I think that all of that translates into, even though it's a completely different arena, like you were saying, it's a whole different set of languages that you gotta learn to sit in front of those three-piece suit guys. But like, those actions and that care and that energy is clearly reaching them, because I've watched them over just even the last few years go from like barely letting us in the door to seeing, like, you know, one of the baddies that we've gone and talked to, Citibank last year, Wells Fargo. These people are like funding some of the biggest projects in the world, right? Like they're funding the tar sands, they're funding LNG terminals, they're funding, you know, extractive industry all over the planet. 30% of their shareholders voting for an Indigenous peoples resolution around free, prior, and informed consent. That is huge to see that. These are the same people that are voting down, like, you know, I remember we were at one, actually we were together with Cedar here. I watched them vote down getting an asterisk next to a project that had slave labor involved in it, and they voted it down. It was like 2% of the vote or something like that. And I was like, not even an asterisk? You couldn't even do an asterisk? You're that evil? Wow. Wow. Okay. But 30% of the vote, right? I mean, like, I feel like that says so much about the power and strength of our people and of our movements and what happens when we stand together. Because these movements are all different people from all different walks of life. Like, that's been really cool, too, to come out of my little tiny town that I grew up in and, like, now get to see Indigenous people alongside anarchists, alongside suburbanites, alongside professors, alongside scientists, alongside all these different people who are all kind of, like, looking at each other, but, like, all doing the same thing, you know? Like, they all care about the same thing because they recognize that, like, when we say water is life, that's not just a slogan. It's, like, the truth. There's no greater truth than those things. And, like, seeing, like, the little cracks in, like, meeting with these banking institutions and having at least one banker come up at the end and kind of pull you aside and look at you with tears in their eyes. And I have children. I'm trying to do everything I can. And I'm like, I'm not going to absolve you. You have to do more because we're still fighting this and we're still sitting here in front of you. We're still sitting across the table. You're still acting like you're not a human being. But you are. And your children are. And I know that you're hearing our words. So for going into those guys, you know, and showing up in their spaces, I mean, when we went into the Chase shareholders meeting a couple years ago, I remember they were listening to all the civil society, and then 2 of us from our territory got up, and when we did, every single shareholder in the entire room turned around and looked at us. And that felt like, all right, you see us. I know you see us. I know that we can use all the different leverages of, like, the UN reports and the litigation and whatever, and we'll get in front of your bankers and tell you what's going on. And we'll push on the policy, and we'll push on the world policy, and we'll push on, you know, the Equator Principles and all these different pieces of fossil fuel investment. But I know that they see us. And yeah, we're not going away anytime soon. I mean, that's Indigenous people, right? That's our relatives. Like, that's who we are. I deeply appreciate all of you. Deeply appreciate our relatives from down south that spoke. I don't know. I know they're scared of us, so yeah. I mean, I feel like it's like those little dirty, grubby kids in the woods. I mean, you're scared of us. Like, you're scared of those people at camp. You're scared of our communities. That's why you've tried so hard to push our communities down and erase us, but we are still here, and we will continue being. So, Miigwech.
I think that's the first time I've ever heard you speak. So that was so amazing for me. Thank you. So I just want to acknowledge that you may have noticed that Grand Chief Stewart Phillip is not here on the stage with us. There were travel complications, so he is not joining us tonight, unfortunately, but I still want to acknowledge him. Grand Chief Stewart Phillip represents the Union of British Columbia Indian Chiefs, UBCIC. who has filed a resolution calling on RBC to implement free, prior, informed consent in their financing decisions. So we have time for 5 questions. We hope to wrap up in the next half hour. So I guess we can get started if anybody has any questions to begin.
He rode his bicycle all over the place, and we talked about climate change. He lived it, and we've got invited to be on a peace boat with the Japanese island people from Acapulco to Vancouver, and we're starting on the deck with moonlight over there, going out to the deep waters. And he mentioned to me that at that moment, Mom, you know, there's all these different laws, the federal laws, international laws, provincial laws. Geneva, Switzerland, and that's what so many people said around the world. They didn't want the corporations taking over their lands. Okay, yes, jokes.
I have a question for the keepers of the water. I hear you talk about Treaty 8, Fort McMurray oil sands. I am part of Treaty 8, and I am from Black Lake, Saskatchewan. And around me is uranium mining, gold, diamonds, it goes on and on. And there was a gold rush, probably proposals, and then there's all these nonprofit organizations that opened up, and they were all formed, and then somehow we don't own nothing in Black Lake right now. My territory right now is being invaded by all these mining companies, and Rio Tinto is gonna be coming over there, and I don't know who's investing them. And the elected chiefs of my community are not talking to us. Everyone that is involved in Black Lake, the election, the land agreement, water rights, they seem to have been paid off for decades and decades. And right now, there's people in Black Lake that are dying. My father right now, it's his birthday today. He's 77 years old today. He just turned 77. And tomorrow, he's going to go through another surgery that is to remove his cancer again. And 2 years ago, he had cancer. It was removed. And then he has cancer again. And then right next door, my auntie has cancer, and she's gonna go pretty soon. And right across from me, there's a lady that battled cancer, and she beat it. And there's another one, babies being born deformed, stillborn. And I came back to my hometown, and not too long ago, the boil water advisory is lifted, they said. And I came back home, I made coffee. For a whole week, I was using the tap water, and I was getting sick. Anything I ate was coming out of me. Like, I couldn't drink water. Like, if I drink tea or water, it comes out. You go to the clinic, and then the doctors just say, there's a flu going around. What kind of flu is going around? Uranium? Or they should call it like that now. And nothing is being done in Black Lake. Like, we need help in Black Lake.
Lou. Yes, There is a lot happening in northern Saskatchewan, and we have 3 board members that are from northern Saskatchewan. So we're a small organization, and you know we have your sister Mary Jane Sizazi. Is that how you say your last name? Sayazi. Marius and Candace Paul. And Keepers of the Water, we do what we can. Like, we went from 0 staff to like 9 staff. So we've always been, like, and that's a whole other topic of how Indigenous organizations are underfunded. You know, we would be sitting at these tables with non-Indigenous organizations, and they would have like 20, 30, 40 staff, and there would be like 1 part-time staff with like, you know, 6-month contract funding. So we've been working really hard to change that part of it. Thanks to Indigenous Climate Action, I'm one of the founders of that, where we're like, no more. You know, like, we want health benefits. We want like full-time jobs. We want the same kind of funding that some of these other organizations have. And so that's been slowly changing. We need staff in northern Saskatchewan because there's so much uranium mining happening. We went up there in, I think it was 2013, when the trappers from La Loche blockaded the road. So anyone listening, if you guys are from like northern Alberta, if you remember Highway 881, Highway 881 was like this quiet, desolate highway that you would only meet like 1 vehicle. It became one of the main highways to the tar sands. So now it's like an industrial freeway. So that was the same highway up to your guys' traditional territory there, and the trappers, because like everyone's so connected to the land up there, they blockaded. So we went and sat with them at that blockade. But it still, to this day, is not getting the attention it needs. And now they're trying to make these small nuclear reactors in the tar sands all across Canada. And like, nuclear is like the most toxic thing in the world, I believe. And so yes, we need help in, you know, we need to get some more staff so that we can, like, we've reached out to Narwhal. We want to get some like news coverage on it, because you guys have a story to tell, and that story needs to be heard by more and more people. So thank you, Blue, and we like, stay in touch with us, and we are starting to do what we can. But if you guys know of other organizations or other media, reach out to Keepers of the Water, because we do want to get these stories out. You know, so that's what I can tell you for now on that.
We can do more testings on the water, maybe.
Yeah, we started a
far.
monitoring program. So like again, we're small. We launched a monitoring program in 2022 thanks to Indian Collective. I'll give them a name drop. And so Candace and Marius are getting the training, and we are going to be starting to do some monitoring out there. But like, the amount we're doing and the amount that needs to happen is like way more than what we're able to do. And so like, if you guys have ideas, or if there's other organizations out there doing the work, let us know so that we can like start helping the communities in northern Saskatchewan. Because like how it's happening in northern BC, it's natural gas, and then they're doing all these like rare mineral mining now is becoming a big thing. Northern BC, you should see how many slots, places are slotted for future mining of these rare minerals. Northwest Territories is rare minerals, and then the northern Alberta is like oil and gas and coal, and then in northern Saskatchewan, it's uranium. Like, it's just insane how much uranium mining is happening up there. So.
So until we get any more questions, I could speak a little bit about why we are connecting banks like RBC to what is happening in all of our communities. And it might be obvious that that the banks are funding this destruction to like our environments, and that's like what we think about when we think about divestment. However, we're here to talk about our rights as Indigenous people, and that is not the same as divesting for environmental rights. We are human here, and we have we have our stories and our traditions and our culture. And this is why we are talking about free, prior, and informed consent, because when companies move into communities, they don't necessarily talk about what the long-term effects are that happen when the infrastructure that they are funding gets old and rusty. And part of like what I talk about when I talk about my own community is that pipelines do not last forever, as an example of infrastructure. Companies act like they last forever and ever, and then eventually they rupture and spill. And so for some reason, banks see this as a good investment. When like companies don't actually take care of their own equipment, cities with mainly non-Indigenous people don't see those impacts. But as soon as there's a flare that was mentioned or a spill, it's always the communities living closest to the land where those refineries or where the infrastructure is based. And so this is why we are coming together to share very similar but different reasons why this is about Indigenous sovereignty more than just environmental rights. So we still have time for questions. Is there anybody else? Cedar, go for it.
Hey, what's up? Yeah, I was just wondering, you know, when it comes to success and moving forward, what is working for you guys, like specifically? Because I know we all have such unique fights, right, in different ways and different tactics that we fight, either it be provincial, state, the federal government, or even just our local racists, right? And so I just want to know what is working for you guys, or what's, you know, for example, like I've heard Namak say bringing people together, or heard my elders say ceremony. You know, we literally blessed every page of our 1,200 page assessment of the Trans Mountain Pipeline. We blessed it, and so I wonder what's working for you guys or even if it's a state of mind, or you know, anything that you want to share with all of us that we can take back to our personal fights. You know, all of us, a lot of us in here have our own fights. What can we take back home and you hear what I'm saying? Thanks.
First, thank you so much for that question. You know, every morning when I wake up, I quit this job every day. When I open my eyes, I'm like, I'm done. It's the same thing every day. It's redundant. I'm tired of fighting the same thing. Again, I'm a black woman in the United States, in the South, where I deal with racism every day. I deal with being shunned, being left out all the time. And, you know, my ancestors had to fight for the right to even be recognized as human beings, and then had to fight for the right to be free, and they had to fight for the right to vote, and they had to fight for the right for everything that was supposed to be just a basic human right. And we're fighting for clean air and clean water, and it's hard. But when I get out of my bed and I walk out into the living room and I see my 6 children's faces, and they're smiling and they're looking at me, you know, and my children aren't babies, you guys. I know I look young, but my children are 19, 18, 17, 15, 10, and 5. But when I look at them and they expect me to have all the answers, my 18-year-old is texting me now. He just texted me, and I got up and walked out because he texted me. He said, I just want to talk to you. They expect me to have the answers. And because I need to have the answers for my babies, I continue to fight, because I want to tell them why the water is brown. I want to tell them why they're getting sick. And the way that we find out is we keep fighting. And what is a win? See, we don't celebrate the real wins, you know, because we're too busy continuing to fight. But if we work together, there are more wins than we think. So, for example, in Texas, we just were able to convince Societe Generale to not invest in the Rio Grande LNG project. That's not just a win for Texas. That's not just a win for the Rio Grande Valley. That's not just a win for the U.S. That's a win for all of us. We have to start celebrating these wins collectively. So I can go home and look at my children and I can say, we won today. We had a win today. In my backyard, where Driftwood LNG has all of its permits. This is a massive, and I just want to clarify something. When we say LNG, when you hear her say natural gas, it's nothing natural about this, okay? It's nothing natural about it. It really is greenwashed. It's liquefied methane gas, right? But this massive LNG facility has been approved in my community, yet it has not laid one brick. They have all the permits they need. But the reason why they haven't laid a brick is because all of us keep fighting. We keep hammering the banks. We're calling these banks. We keep doing these bank things, and we keep calling them and saying, stop funding environmental racism. So every bank they go to, they're like, no, we're not funding this project. No, we're not funding this project. I can't necessarily say that I'm the only reason, because everybody is doing this. We're working together. It's a collective thing. We have to start looking at all of these wins for all of us, because if we look at individual site fights, is what we're starting to see in the United States. I may be able to get Driftwood not to build in my community, but what is it going to do? Come to yours. It's going to move. It's going to say, oh, well, we're not going to go there, but we're going to go over here and build. But if we work together and we say, hey, RBC, stop funding oil and gas, guess what? They're going to stop funding oil and gas. That means it won't come to my community or your community. And we won together. But the other thing, the other way we win, and we continue to fight every day, other than our children, who we are doing this for, our children and their grandchildren, is because of what somebody else said earlier, the elders who have gone before us. We are our ancestors' wildest dreams. We are who they were fighting for. So that is a win. We are getting to stand here in their shoes and walk in the footprints that they have laid before us, and we continue to keep fighting. And we know that it's because of them, and we have their spirit, and we have their strength, and we have their power, and we know that we can't give up. Because as a black woman, there was some slaves who survived underwater when that boat was coming to America. There are some slaves who survived being tied up under that ship. There are some slaves who escaped that ship. There are some slaves who escaped slavery that are my ancestors. And if they could do it, who am I to say that I can't? So we have every right to everything that this earth has to offer. And if we don't continue to fight for it and celebrate all of our collective wins, we give up that right. And somebody was talking about the only law is the natural law. The natural thing that we don't even think about when we get up in the morning is breathing. We don't think about it. It just happens, right? That's our natural right. But some of us look and we can see the air that we're breathing. It feels like you can almost pick it up, like you can grab it. It's so thick. It's so hard to breathe in. That's what we're fighting for. And those are our wins. And we're in this together. I don't want to do this. I keep doing it for my children. I keep doing it because I know all of you are doing it. I do it because when I'm standing in that room in front of 12 white men who have on steel-toe boots and who just came from working in the very industry that I'm fighting, but now they're the ones making the decisions on if those industries come to the community or not because they're making the billions of dollars, I know that people like you are fighting too. And I know that I'm not alone. Those are our wins.
we're talking about banks because I think it's a really effective tactic, right? Targeting the financial industry is like a super effective tactic of all the tactics I've seen, at least in campaigning against a giant project. You can go to them, show up. They're a lot more susceptible to pressure than when you show up to Enbridge or you show up to like, you know, any of these big companies. Like the fossil fuel companies are obviously like, okay, well that's our business, so what do you want from us? You know, we're gonna buy a couple of solar panels or something like that, and that's gonna be like our big green plan or something, and you're like, oh my God. So I think that that's been really, really effective. I also like continually hammer home again and again and again in front of every body of people that is not in the know that around this place that we call home, this living relative that we have, Indigenous people hold 80% of the world's remaining biodiversity. We literally are holding our lives and the life that we need on a habitable planet together, right? Like that's all of us collectively. And so the work I've been able to see of little groups of people who have been using their skill sets to work with different communities, Indigenous communities across the globe, to establish land trusts, privately held land, any sort of like land back. You know, I mean, that's what we call it up here, right? It's like land back, but it's happening in a way that's, I feel like if we're holding that much of what's left of the sacred and what's left of what's still the rivers you can drink from, which is, yeah, I mean, we can't drink from our rivers, right? But if we're holding on to that, I mean, there has to be a solution that's present in the people that are trying to make sure that it actually stays in our hands. And that does not just mean elected tribal governments. That doesn't mean just traditional government. It means we try to figure out who are the stewards of the earth, you know, like who are the people that are actually stewarding this? Who are the people that are still in relationship? How do we protect that land and give the legal mechanisms to actually do so? I found that to be really, really powerful. And like, you see, you know, rights of a river, right? All of a sudden the river is viewed as a living being and it can sue somebody. You see rights of wild rice. Wild rice becomes a being and it sues somebody. You see the tribe that's out in the Amazon that's still living in the way that we should all be living, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean we're living in like, you know, like in caves, right? Like that's always like what do you want me living in a cave? No, but it'd be probably a good idea to maybe not consume quite so much, right? Might be a little bit over the line in terms of what we can take and what we're giving. But yeah, land back. Land back.
I believe we have a couple questions online, Katie?
Yeah. Besides RBC, what are some other banks that you could name that folks should consider divesting from?
Well, Chase. Most of them. Chase is the biggest funder of fossil fuels in the world. Yeah. Chase Bank, Bank of America, Citibank, Wells Fargo.
Goldman
Yeah.
Sachs.
I think those are the top ones.
Goldman Sachs is the other one.
Insurance companies too.
Yeah, insurers are actually easier to knock off. They're actually, you know, I mean, they gotta like pay for climate crisis, so.
And speaking on insurance companies,
Yeah, or
in
like Allianz and
Louisiana,
all
where
those
we
guys, like,
just had these massive hurricanes, it's harder for homeowners to get insurance than it is for industry to get insurance.
The online people can't even hear us, so.
Oh.
And it's their
Well, we gotta
question.
speak it to the mic?
Yes, yeah.
Oh.
Come on up.
We're all
So
like-
we just named all the banks, and we were like, Chase is the biggest financer of fossil fuels. So J.P. Morgan Chase, Goldman Sachs, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Citibank, Chubb, Societe Generale, it's all the banks. And so when people think about divesting and you think about the banks that are funding this fossil fuel crisis or funding environmental racism, you know, when you talk to people about those banks, Another perspective that we don't look at is the insurance agencies, and that's what we were just talking about before we got on the microphone. And so it's harder for homeowners and regular people to get insurance after climate-induced emergencies. You know, like she was talking about the earthquake, the hurricanes that happen in Louisiana, floods that happen. Our insurance premiums go up, but these industries get insurance quickly from insurance agencies. So we can target the insurance agencies, not just the banks, and also targeting investment banking, like BlackRock and Vanguard. When you can look at their biggest investors, like Amazon, for example, is invests into Vanguard, and you can say, well, Amazon, do you understand that Vanguard is funding environmental racism? We're going to protest Amazon. We're not gonna, spend our money with you anymore. We're gonna stop shopping online. I know it's hard. If you're like me, you have a cart full of stuff. But if we go to those big companies that have all of their money invested into these financiers, then that's another way that we can target their money, because Vanguard and BlackRock and all those banks they care about their image. They care about, how they look to society. So whenever all of us are coming together to say, this is what you're funding in my community, they're pulling their money out. And we've seen it continuously happen. We saw it with Chubb, we saw it with Society Generale, we've seen it with the funding for Driftwood LNG. We continue to see these wins when it comes to financing these fossil fuel infrastructure projects. But the next step in that is also going after the insurance agencies. They can't be built without insurance. So the divestment, the insurance and the banks and the investment groups, it all goes together.
Is there any more questions?
Yeah, we have another question from online. It says, hi, settler ally from Tsleil-Waututh territory. I need to ask if abolishing the Indian Act would help in any way, or what can those of us do to defang the federal government from imposing its will upon Indigenous communities?
Sorry, can I get you to repeat that? I feel like I couldn't really hear it and it was really fast.
Okay. Sorry. If abolishing the Indian Act would help in any way, or what can those of us do to defang the federal government from imposing its will on Indigenous communities?
We're all looking at the lawyer.
I mean, yeah, but I'm a lawyer on the other side. I mean, I don't. What's your name? Yeah, I mean. Okay, so I'll say this. So on the state side right now, there's a case making its way through the courts on the Indian Child Welfare Act. And the piece they're after is specifically what they believe to be a violation of the Equal Protection Clause, which would invalidate basically the whole of federal Indian law, right? Like they've been after that for a long time, like these for-profit groups, because they don't want us to have any protections. They want us to not have a sovereign status and nation status. So I mean, I think that it's always a double-edged sword, right? Like with all of these colonially created laws that sort of recognize our nationhood but sort of don't. They sort of recognize sovereignty, they sort of don't. They sort of like recognize that we're a political class of people, right? Like that we're the original peoples, we're not just a racial category, right? Like, even though they've tried really hard to do that too through blood quantum and all of that, right? Like genocide on paper. So I think, the defanging part is more what I'm interested in, right? And I don't even know if it's like, what I've seen some of the most clever lawyers that I know do is not necessarily defang, they work their way around the fangs. They're like the mouse that's like darting into the lion's mouth and like coming back out with something, And I've seen like lawyers that are Well, I might be indicted next week, but I haven't been indicted yet for that last thing. So, like, I'm just gonna keep moving because this is a gray area of the law, and they don't know. You know what I mean? Like, no one knows. We're just gonna try it out. You know? I mean, I think there's like the thing that I really took away from that particular person is like, rather than always thinking about like the things that are taken away, think about what's left, right? And like, how do we make the most of that and like protect those inherent sovereignty pieces that we have, right? Because like there is also a different kind of sovereignty that isn't defined by the feds. You know, that's their version of sovereignty. There's also like, I mean, that's what, look at Wet'suwet'en. I mean, you're talking about that inherent sovereignty, that inherent, like that you're in a whole different area of law. You're into natural law of the people, right? So like, yeah, I mean, you can think about what could be. I mean, I'm sure plenty of academics are going down that road. But, I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm just like more of a pragmatic organizer, like what can we do with what we have? And like, you know, someone else can work on the trying to reform pieces.
Are you gonna
What's that?
speak to?
Not really, because I don't even know what we'll replace it with. That's a big question.
Yeah.
Expert, oh wow.
already established and precedents has been set. Is there a way of just hanging on to that and finding our own way to keep pounding at that?
I think so. I mean, I've seen the same thing has happened on the other side, right? Like where there's like a few like really critical cases, like whether it's off-reservation treaty rights or rights to harvest, rights to gather, rights to healthy rivers, rights to water. And like you just keep hammering away on like, you know, we're gonna assert those cases. I mean, the one thing that I really do think that there's something to our people not only establishing and implementing, but our own justice systems, right? That are not so much reliant on like the provincial courts or the state courts in our case or whatever, right? Like, I feel like if we work on building what we want as a people, there is something to that, right? Like building those alternate. We can't always talk about like the better world without actually also starting to build that world at the same time.
And I believe that they have more fear because when people are even a leader, when a leader, a chief, any kind of a leader is being honest from top to bottom, they always stand alone. And I think the way they're so afraid collectively, and the more we get together, the bigger the truth is becoming. And they can sense that. So when you look at We'tsuwet'en, what the government, and they're doing because of that truth. They're using tactics that, I mean, we're Canada, you know, for crying out loud. But the tactics that they're using is because that's the truth. They're doing everything they can. And same with their justice system, everything. To turn a blind eye, and they're above the law because of that truth spilling out. And it's slowly seeping out, and the more collective we become, that truth is coming. That's the fear that they have. Because materialistic.
Huh? We're gonna have each closing remarks and then.
I know we
world
could
is
keep
watching,
we
right?
could keep talking all night, but I'm here to break the bad news that our time is coming to an end, and I just wanted to make sure that all of our speakers have a moment for some closing words.
I started tonight speaking first so we could have a conversation. I'm so very honored to be on the stage with all of you. But you see the conversation and how it melded together and made you all think. Well, that's what free humans do, you think. To me, that was my goal. I didn't listen to your comments on the We'tsuwet'en and the truth. Each of you have that truth. You've heard the truth. What are you going to do with that truth? Myself, I don't rely too much on the elected officials. I told you, full diaper reeks, right? Pretty much that's what we've heard from the politicians. We elect them in, and then they get steered by corporations and industry and follow them. Then they come back to us and say, you know what, I tried my best. Well, obviously their best isn't good enough if the planet is in this crisis. But again, I got to tell it, each of you can make a difference. Each of you need to stand up. Don't let these people tell you that your silence is to acquiesce to them. If you don't speak up, they're going to think you're on their side. You know, as human beings, all of us have a right to live. All of us have a right to breathe and drink clean water. I don't want to see the rest of you go into water advisories, as we heard of, having to have water delivered to your home, having your children going up with asthma. I'm so sorry, but I'm going to have to mention this. Last summer, we went on we called it an SOS tour, Save Our Sovereignty. We went to your community. Children going into a preschool are given a puffer every morning. Do you want that for your children? A puffer so they can actually breathe, whether they need it or not, because they're surrounded by 63 chemical plants. You talked about reaching out and grabbing that air that is that thick. Each of you have the right to change that, you know. Each of you have a duty to change that. And each of you should do that, Messiah.
My closing thoughts are just to be strong, be brave. Remember who you are. Remember that your voice is your own vibrational energy. It belongs to just you, and that voice needs to be heard. And whatever the best way you can make it heard is. Not everyone has to fight on a front line. Not everyone has to go and talk to a bank. Not everyone has to go and walk with the water. Not everyone has, but somebody does. And to never feel like there isn't hope, because we are our ancestors' wildest dreams, right? Like, they went through how much to get us here. And those trees saw how much of us fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting and watching us over generations to be the strongest, most badass people still here, right? I mean, that's what we're, yeah. I mean, I also feel really strongly about, like, final thoughts. I'm really honored to be sitting here with a relative. Theft of land, theft of labor, heart of colonialism, the reason why the whole colonial project exists. But yeah, just hold on to your hearts, make space for yourself, keep your spirit strong, take care of your spirits. If you burn out, go spend time with the water. That's what I did throughout all of it, and I still do, all the time. Miigwech.
I'm a crybaby, y'all. I came here not really knowing anybody. I remember getting the email being asked to be a part of the delegation, and then getting an email saying, well, we have to get permission, and then getting an email saying, you know, we have to get you a proxy to get in. And the whole time, every day, I'm like, you know, why me? Who am I? Who am I to do this? Who am I? And I'm just a little, you know, girl from Ruleville, Mississippi. I'm originally from Mississippi, but I've been in Louisiana for 20 years. And my hometown is home to a civil rights activist named Miss Fannie Lou Hamer. And Miss Fannie Lou Hamer, if you've ever heard of her, worldwide known. Miss Fannie Lou Hamer had some famous words. I know we know several of her quotes. But right before she went to Jackson, Mississippi to register to vote, the white man who owned the land that she lived on, where she owned the house, but he still owned the land. And that's the way it still is in parts of Mississippi. So he came and he threatened her, and he told her, if you go down to Jackson to register to vote, you have to get off my land. And she told him she didn't care. She said, so what if I'm a sharecropper? Does that make me any less of a human being? The government gave me every right to go down to Jackson and register to vote. So if you say that I'll have to move if I go down to Jackson, that don't scare me. So those words are in my head every time I ask myself, who am I? So what that I'm a woman? So what that I'm a black woman? So what that I'm a single mother of 6? Those are the very reasons why I need to fight. Those are the very reasons why I need to fight the hardest. I came here not knowing everybody, but now I feel like I'm a part of the family. I thank you all for welcoming me. When I hear things like Cancer Alley, we say those same things in Louisiana. We have our own Cancer Alleys. We have Cancer Alley near New Orleans and then Cancer Alley where I live. When I hear things like the government is not helping us, they're not protecting us, they were never meant to. The government was never set in place to protect us. It's our responsibility to protect ourselves and to protect each other. The government is who pitted us against each other. They're the ones who use our skin color, our race, our backgrounds to keep us divided. It's up to us to protect each other. We're all relatives. We're all from this same dirt, this same land, this same earth. There's no separating the water. The water that flows through my community flows through yours. You know, there's that process, the water evaporates into the clouds. And where does it rain down to? It goes back to the water. We're all connected through that same water. If my water is not safe, your water is not safe. Your water is not safe, my water is not safe. You also cannot separate the air. How do you separate air? How do you know whose air is whose air? If your air is not safe, neither is mine. We have to stop separating each other, stop separating the fights, and remember that we're all human beings. We only get one earth. And I know we like to call earth our mother, but I'm a mother, and I look at the earth as my baby. In the same way that I protect my children, I'm going to continue to protect my baby, Mother Earth, because it's my right. I'm a part of this earth just as much as it's a part of me. So thank you all for welcoming me here.
So for closing thoughts, I just want to talk a little bit about our relationship to the land. And so as Indigenous people, we were violently removed from the land. Our relationship was purposely severed. And so through some of the stuff that we're doing through decolonization, it's really important for us to return to nurture our relationship and to return to the land. And so me too, I was like, who am I? You know, I'm the first person on my dad's side of the family to graduate with a degree, and now I'll be going for my master's. You know, so like some people from my family, they don't even leave the community other than to go to town, but my ancestors' prayers. And so I attend the University of Blue Quills. It used to be a residential school. My mushum attended there. So the same school he was not allowed to speak his language is where I'm learning the language. So I'm learning the Cree language. And I thank those elders who did a sit-in in the 70s because the white people were still trying to run it. And they were told, you're dumb. You're never gonna be able to run this school. You have no education. And my ancestors, the people from Saddle Lake and Kihiwin and Frog Lake and Heart Lake and Goodfish Lake, they sat there and Coal Lake First Nation and they did a sit-in and they took over that building and turned it into a recognized institution. So people are getting PhDs from there now. And so part of what they teach us and part of what they nurtures and other stuff too, like ceremony, but nurturing our relationship to the land. And why that's so important, so we do that through school, we do that through ceremony, you know, berry picking, medicine picking. The more people that do it, the more people that are gonna care about the land. So, you know, it's important, like more and more schools are starting to they want land-based learning, that's a big thing. So more and more schools are wanting to take the kids out to learn how to pick medicines, to pick berries, to learn how to fish. Women are learning how to hunt. When COVID happened, we were again landlocked. Like we were scared to drive down the road because we could be arrested. That was real, and that's gonna happen again. And so when that happened, there was communities all over Treaty 8 territory, Treaty 6 territory that were, because the grocery stores were going, the shelves were going empty. There was literally no food in some of the stores. The elders couldn't leave, you know, so we mobilized in our communities and we got hunting crews. So it was so clear to us how important it was to have access to clean water, to have access to the moose, to the deer. Like all of a sudden people that, you know, were all in the communities that were sleeping woke up and realized how important that is. You know, and as Indigenous people, we share. And so you wonder if you're not Indigenous, well, how does this apply to me? You know, it's like we share. And so just know that we're fighting for everybody. And so that's what I want to say is our relationship to the land. 2 resources somebody asked online about treaty rights. Janice Makokis is doing some excellent work on treaty rights. Onion Lake Cree Nation, they are a model nation of what they're trying to do to get away from the Indian Act. And also Margot Auger with Treaty 8. So those are some names for people online if you guys are looking on like what are we gonna replace instead of the Indian Act. I have lots more to share, but I just want you guys to all go home. You know, how can you help? Pray. You can pray for the water. You can say a prayer tonight. You know, put some tobacco down. If you don't have tobacco down, that's okay. Pray. And the one thing I want to leave you guys with is when you're driving or when you're walking and you're walking by a body of water, which you guys are lucky because you guys have the Saskatchewan River like right here. It's so beautiful. And when the sun is shining down, whenever you're passing water and you see the sparkles on the water and you see that light, and automatically when you're driving by or you're walking by and you see that water sparkling, you feel good. You automatically feel good. You know why? Because we are water beings. We are mostly made up of water. So that water spirit is talking to our water spirit. So just remember that when you guys see that sparkle on the water, automatically you feel good. Say hello to that water spirit and give thanks for that. So there's so much around us, and I thank you all. Kinana skump nawao, sagi nawao. I love you all. I thank you all. Safe journeys home. Hi, hi.
Well, our time has come to an end. I just want to say that sharing this painful truth of the years and years and work it takes to do this is not easy. So please remember that they just make it look easy. It's not. It's emotionally draining. And it's really, really important work, and we are so, so grateful for what time we do have with you all. So some of our Indigenous delegates and the Indigenous community members that come together are going on 12 hours of all of this. So thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you so much. Your attention means so much to us. Thank you all to everyone online for joining us. And I'm pretty sure this is going to be recorded, so if you want to check this out. Oh, yeah. Okay, so I will leave off with we are having a rally here in Saskatoon if you are around. We are going to be meeting at 11 a.m. At the, it's a gazebo at the Kwanzaa's Park. So the rally will include like drumming and music and some speeches. So we invite you all to come out at 11 a.m. And thank you again. Miigwech.